Hi all, Kathleen Ellertson. I'm with Intel Corporation, and I'm the Intel Cluster Ready Marketing Manager based in Folsom, California. Glad to be in Hamburg. Not sure how many of you are familiar with, I hope a lot, of Intel Cluster Ready, with Intel Cluster Ready, but we're going to do a presentation, a brief presentation about the product itself or the program itself, and then Michael Wirth from Transtec is going to talk about real-life application of that in his business. So Intel Cluster Ready, and by the way, we have to provide the legal stuff, so hope you're all speed readers. That's it. That's it. You've seen that cartoon where all these bad things happen to the person that said, well, you signed the terms and conditions, you read the disclaimer, didn't you? Yeah, this is it, so you had your chance. Yes, sure, Kathleen Ellertson, E-L-L-E-R-T-S-O-N, and I have business cards at the end. Okay. I wanted to mention that the market that Intel Cluster Ready addresses best is the mid-market. And the mid-market is an area that is growing worldwide as clusters become more reachable, and the audience and the need for high-performance computing grows. People are growing from perhaps being able to have better performance in their work using a cluster than perhaps just a workstation, and the mid-market is an area of extreme growth. We've done quite a bit of research on this, and we have some articles and papers that we can offer to you demonstrating this. But that's the key here, is that the mid-market addresses, or the key values of the mid-market are listed here that at least we feel Intel Cluster Ready helps with. So Michael will be talking about those areas as well as they're incorporated into his presentation. So what is Intel Cluster Ready? Intel Cluster Ready is a standards-based Linux platform. It is an architecture. It is also a partner program. And it is something that helps you to not only design, engineer, manufacture, and deploy clusters, but also helps your end customers to have much greater customer satisfaction in the deployment and use of their clusters, and we'll talk about that. As an OEM or a partner, a system integrator, it provides you the confidence to be able to provide your clusters to your customers with greater ROI for yourself, so that you don't have to spend as much time fixing problems if they occur on the customer site. You've already caught them at the design stage. And the list of things that are included here, I'm not going to go through all of this. It's a short presentation. But we do have a complete Intel Cluster Ready website that I can send as in response to this presentation today. If you're not part of our Intel Cluster Ready group and don't receive our Intel Cluster Ready newsletter or are attached to the site, there's a plethora of information out there. Pictures speak louder than words, so it is one cluster architecture. It's Intel's standard architecture for producing clusters. It's a standards-based Linux platform, and it allows users to choose several different applications. We have tested them, Intel Cluster Ready certified, if you will, and allows the manufacturer to provide clusters on several applications and use one cluster over and over. You can validate and verify not only your cluster configuration during testing, but continue to use the Intel Cluster Checker, which is a tool that is provided as part of the program for your customers. And this is the way that works. Again, the visual is self-explanatory. the tests are run. There is a verification of all the different components, including the application, the connections, the hardware, the software, and everything just works. That's the key. You're able to catch anything that might not be thoroughly functional, which again Michael will speak to before it gets out to the customer floor. And then finally, being able to provide support to your customers with the Intel Cluster Checker tool. If you're doing remote maintenance as a OEM or a system integrator, if you are an end user and you're doing system administration yourself, you can use the Intel Cluster Checker to continue to monitor and perform preventative maintenance and make sure that you have complete uptime. So here's our last optimization legal notice. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael Wirth from Transtec, and he is an Intel Cluster Ready partner.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Yeah, and we'll need to just get your presentation up here.
Beautiful. Thanks very much, Kathleen. So I'm going to talk about the perspective of a manufacturer, solution provider, and system integrator, which Transtec is. So we are, on the one hand, a manufacturer of systems, of clusters, and also a solution provider. We also provide all the necessary services and support to plan, build, and run an HPC system solution. My name is Michael Wirth, or if you like, Michael, for the international people here. From Transtec, located in the south of Germany. We are present in 7 European countries, including Great Britain and France, Belgium, Netherlands, Switzerland, Austria. I didn't see it before. Does anyone work with Intel Cluster Ready program? You do, obviously, yeah. No one else? Okay, you do? Great. Okay, so my first question would be, why certify an HPC cluster? Well, basically you would try to make sure that you get the utmost possible productivity out of a new HPC system. At least that is what management wants to achieve. Then, of course, investment in a cluster solution is substantial, so you want some return on that substantial investment. And of course, your total cost of ownership should be low, as low as possible. Your users, the people that really use the HPC system, want some availability. They want the system to be available whenever they want to calculate. They want the system to be performing reasonably well, and it should be easy to use. Now, ease of use is a different thing. I'm not going to talk about this today, but availability and performance are things that can be assured through the Intel Cluster Ready program. And of course, what the administrator of a cluster wants is, of course, documentation and monitoring tools, which we can provide, but also thoroughly tested hardware, and he wants to make sure that the software they use really is interoperable. So everything has to be present, the libraries have to be there for the necessary applications, and then of course they want flexible and meaningful troubleshooting tools. Oh, excuse me. Now here, just to stress that again, as a cluster manufacturer or vendor, we try to achieve all of these goals. So we need hardware reliability, software interoperability, good troubleshooting tools, then of course for the user level, availability, performance, ease of use, and then as a result of all these, productivity. There's a few problems, challenges that we run into as a manufacturer whenever we build HPC systems, because each HPC cluster is very complex. When you try to build an HPC cluster from scratch, you will notice that building such a system involves several thousand single steps. You're shaking your head. Okay, you're probably thinking about cluster management tools, and things like that. Yeah, of course. Like I said, from scratch, maybe only with open source tools. And of course, most HPC systems differ from each other in detail, which poses a problem for us because quality management is then a problem. You cannot define a single way of quality management. You need to define, identify common steps in the design process, in the build process, during the installation and configuration. So the quality process is hard to implement regardless of the cluster management software, by the way, because it all starts at the hardware. So design process has to be changed. We need to adapt the build process from time to time for each new HPC cluster. And of course, deployment and testing are time consuming. That is what Kathleen mentioned earlier when she said you want to shorten time to market, want to shorten the time that we need to build and deploy HPC clusters. Now, this is what management wants. This is what we need to provide in the first place. Hardware reliability and software interoperability. And this is where the Intel Cluster Checker comes into place. Also for troubleshooting. Now, from hardware reliability and software interoperability comes availability. If your hardware fails all the time, it won't be available. If your software is not thoroughly tested, it doesn't work together, if the libraries are not present, then your cluster will not perform, will not run at all. And it all comes down to productivity. If these things are fulfilled, you will see high productivity in your cluster. If not, then of course productivity will be low. And this is our claim, as you can see in the upper right corner, Transtec accelerate productivity. So this is what we want to achieve, highest possible productivity in each HPC system that we deploy. So what the Intel Cluster Checker now does is check all hardware in the process of certification. There are literally dozens of tests. Starts with checking BIOS versions of all nodes. If BIOS versions are identical, CPUs are identical. By the way, it only works if you use Intel CPUs, of course. Then the memory should be identical. The amount in each node. Of course, you can also define profiles, different profiles for different groups of nodes. Then Ethernet adapters, InfiniBand HCAs and whatnot. It's checking for possible bottlenecks. So it also documents your possibilities for tuning, which is very important for us if we want to optimize the configuration of such a cluster. And of course, discovering misconfigurations is a very important thing. You could, of course, develop your own tests to discover misconfigurations, but it's all there with the Intel Cluster Checker. So for each system, Transtec is typically present in the mid-market, so we normally deploy clusters below 128 nodes. We rarely do larger clusters. So this is the perfect tool to not only to certify a cluster, but also to check and verify that the configuration is correct, hardware and software. Now for software interoperability, OS versions are checked, libraries and their dependencies. What you do is before you start to certify a cluster, you create a cluster recipe. And this recipe is, so to speak, fed into the Intel Cluster Checker, and it verifies if the recipe is really correct. So are all defined components really present? And then things like, very important, things like user authentication. Does user authentication work on all nodes? Are the permissions on all nodes the same? Regardless if you, whether you start off with a stateless or diskless installation, or whether you deploy operating systems on all nodes. It doesn't matter. Then, of course, the overall performance is measured. Then HPCC is run. network performance with IMB. And there is a point-to-point and all-to-all check between all the nodes and the master nodes. So this is a real-world example. This is a small cluster that we think, I'm almost sure, we sold that to Imperial College in London. What turned out, the first cluster run, that there was a twin-squared system that we had on stock before. So it had a different BIOS version, which of course isn't the world's end, but it shouldn't be the case on a well-working cluster. So we had to update the BIOS versions because it was simply forgotten in production. This is things you can very easily find out with the cluster checker. Also, faulty RAM modules. I mean, if you have a cluster with hundreds of RAM modules, I think we have a percentage of about 1.4 or 1.6% of memory modules that are faulty in the first 2 months or so. After that, they're normally stable. So after deployment of a cluster, if you thoroughly do your burn-in tests, they are normally stable. Then there was one case of a hard drive firmware error, and we changed the hard drives. And it even tells you which cables are not in the right place or they're faulty. So we had Ethernet cables, and we had to change an InfiniBand cable as well. So this can very easily be found out by using the Intel Cluster Checker, and makes things easier for us in the quality management process. Of course, it forces us to optimize quality checks and to create a perfect configuration. Of course, it forces us to optimize quality checks before running the Intel Cluster Checker, because if you have a bad quality check before you, when you build the cluster and before you run the certification, then you can run the certification over and over again, and it tells you your system is still misconfigured all the time. So this doesn't happen anymore when we build clusters, because now our quality management is a lot better, also thanks to the Intel Cluster Ready program. Now, to summarize things, we do hardware checks to ensure the correct basic functionality of each node. It also proves that our cluster recipe is correct, so the documented hardware profile or profiles, if you have several, are correct. You might have SMP nodes, you might have fat nodes, you might have slim nodes, whatever, in your cluster design. Make sure that any certified application will run, because all the libraries are there, everything checked. The performance testing shows real-life performance, at least with the benchmarks they're running. So you can be sure that all the certified software, and this is a small non-representative selection of software that is mostly run in the industry sector, these are all certified applications for Intel Cluster Ready program. So when we certify a cluster recipe, we also certify and promise to the customer that all this software will run without additional installation, without additional anything. So what we do after rollout of the cluster solution, of course, we set up the cluster in its racks at the customer's site and then rerun the certification. So the customer can see that the cluster is working as expected. And after that, the cluster checker is simply left on the master node of the cluster and serves subsequently as a tool for troubleshooting. This is excellent, because if you run into problems as a customer, what you do is you simply rerun the certification process, and it tells you exactly where the problem is. So it's also a good support tool for us, because, of course, we sell support, we sell services along with our clusters. And this is a brilliant way of starting support, because the customer now wants to report as accurately as possible what the problem is. And, of course, we need to know exactly where the problem is, to be able to deliver the best possible support. Now, this is an optimal base to guarantee the foundation for availability, performance, and ease of use, and therefore, of course, for productivity. Now, what is mentioned here is the Transtec 360 service concepts that we sell along with these cluster solutions. This goes hand in hand with the Intel Cluster Ready certification program and the subsequent troubleshooting tool. Transtec 360 basically is a program consisting of hardware support, additional services, and 24/7 support for software and third-party vendors, maybe operating system vendors like Red Hat, maybe cluster management vendors like, for example, Bright Cluster Manager, or IBM platform, or maybe switch manufacturers like Mellanox or QLogic, or now Intel. Okay, so our portfolio for 360 is basically the plan, build, and run. So we do IT design. Of course, the design of an HPC cluster solution is equally important. Then installation services, hardware, managed services, and repair center. So the plan, build, and run strategy is contained in the whole portfolio. Okay, so the customer service center provides support from 8 to 18. For special customers, we have a service delivery manager who is reachable 24/7. This is for our premium customers. And then, of course, what, in case of an unknown trouble with the cluster, what the service development manager asks the customer to do is try to rerun the Intel Cluster Checker in the first place until it's known what the problem is. Okay, so this is one more date, some dates of our customer service center. Few complaints, very good reachability, and 100% service level agreement reached. Okay, so to sum it all up, from the perspective of a manufacturer, this chain from troubleshooting, hardware reliability, software interoperability, to the highest possible availability, performance, to productivity, and finally what management wants to achieve, this return on investment and lowest possible total cost of ownership can be reached with a good combination of cluster design and the Intel Cluster Ready program. It's a challenge for us for quality management, but it's a benefit for the customer. Definitely is. So thank you very much for your attention. Are there any questions?